Savo, do you want to introduce or
Yes,
should I start?
definitely. Yes, definitely. I will start. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's session. It's so nice to see you all. I can recognize some of the names, and I also see new names, which is very exciting. For those who might not know me or know our organization, my name is Savo Bakhtiar, and I am the Senior Coordinator at 51 Labs. 51 Labs is a non-profit organization. We are a startup incubator working with entrepreneurs to develop and grow their businesses, focusing on the Kurdistan region of Iraq, but Iraq as a whole. Before I hand it to our amazing guest, I just want to share a couple of housekeeping points with you. As you notice, when you log into this session, you are all muted. That's just because we want a better sound quality. And I would like to share with you that starting this point, this session will be recorded and shared on our social media platform. So in case you miss any section or we know Iraq internet electricity, if it cut off, you can always go back to our YouTube channel, which I will share with you with a survey after the session, and you can just visit the session back. Also, we will have a Q&A session at the end of this. It's about 15 to 20 minutes, but if you have any questions in the meanwhile, we have the chat box. If you are using a computer, it's at the bottom. There's a chat button. If you are using your phone to log in, there should be an option that's more. If you click it, the second option is the chat. We've already said hello, and if you would like to introduce yourself, we will be happy to see it as well. Now, let me introduce our amazing guest today, Chris Blasey, which he's amazing for giving us his time. He's been really busy, and it's early in the morning for him, so thank you so much. I'm just gonna hand it out to you, Chris. You can maybe start with a brief about yourself, and we can just dive into this session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Savo, for that kind introduction. Thank you to 51 Labs for hosting this event today and giving me a chance to speak with you all. And thank you for coming. This is a topic that is close to the work that I do, and I'm excited to share with you today what I've learned through my work. I wanted to start with this quote. It's by Sam Altman, who is the former president of Y Combinator, which is probably the most successful startup incubator in the world. It helped companies like Airbnb get started, Dropbox, Twitch, Reddit, Stripe. So companies that many of you are familiar with. Who's the former president. He's also the CEO of his own company, OpenAI, which was formerly backed by Elon Musk. And here's what he has to say about hiring. After startups raise money, their next biggest problem becomes hiring. It turns out it's both really hard and really important to hire good people. In fact, it's probably the most important thing a founder does. If you don't hire very well, you will not be successful. Companies are a product of the team the founders build. There is no way you can build an important company by yourself. It is easy to delude yourself into thinking that you can manage a mediocre hire into doing good work. And while this quote is really about startups, it's really about hiring in general. People are at the core of every business. And the people you hire and the decisions that they make and the work that they do will determine how successful or how not successful your company is. A little bit about myself. I work as an executive recruiter for a company called Heidrick & Struggles. So companies hire my company to recruit executives for them. I recently recruited the CEO for a 20,000 person company manufactures wire harnesses. I do a lot of work in recruiting executives for chemicals companies, including CEOs and reports to the CEO. So hiring is something that I do day in, day out. And I'm excited to be talking to you a little bit about the process of hiring. And I think it's worth noting that even though hiring a CEO is different from hiring a salesperson, a lot of the processes that we use to hire a good CEO can be applied and used to recruit any person into any position successfully. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge everybody who took the survey. It was very helpful. I learned a lot about who you are, the types of hiring that you do, the types of topics that you're interested in. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but we have a diverse group, including technical people like engineers, students, HR employees, business managers, sales and marketing professionals. And it became clear that while you all had different problems with talent recruitment and hiring, whether it was finding poor candidates or not knowing how to assess them or not getting enough people interested, there's also a lot of things you also wanted to learn that was in common, which was, how can I find a talented employee? And when I find many talented and potential employees, how do I choose just one? And these are really the topics that we're going to focus on today. And we're going to learn about that through what I call the life cycle of a search. And this is really how we think about hiring an executive from start to finish. And I'm going to go through that process with you, what we do at each stage, and what are some common mistakes that people make at each stage as well. So we're going to start with the preparation process, because this is a step that most people forget, but there really is something to do before you start. The next is attracting talent. How do you get people interested in your company? Third, how to interview well. And finally, how to select a candidate from those interviews. We're going to end with some question and answer, both from questions that you put in the chat throughout the presentation. I'll try to take a look through when we get there, but also some of the questions I heard from the survey we sent out. So without further ado, we'll jump in. So preparing for a successful hiring process. And, even if you're recruiting a CEO or you're recruiting a salesperson or an HR manager, you really need to understand the job that you're recruiting for. That is the first thing you need to do. And you need to understand it on a daily level. What will this person do for 80% of their time every single day? And the easiest way to learn that is to talk to their team. So talk to their boss, talk to their peers, and to some extent, talk to people who might answer to this person. And learn about what they'll be doing, and perhaps more importantly, learn what qualities and experiences make a person successful for this job. So if you're, for example, trying to hire somebody for your finance department, what do they really need to know how to do? Maybe it's cost accounting. Maybe it's budgeting. Maybe it's creating financial reports. You need to determine the skills that this person will need in order to do their job effectively. And you need to do that by talking with the team. So once you've established these criteria, these skills, probably want around 3 to 5 key skills that you're looking for, key skills and experiences that you're looking for. And from that, you should write a job description. And with that, you should go back to the team and you should have them review it, because you could be missing something, or there could be something that they didn't communicate that they just remembered, and you should incorporate that into your document. Now, one thing that's important to remember here is that a job description is actually a marketing tool. You're going to use this to get candidates interested in your opportunity and your job. So at this stage, you need to think critically about why somebody would want to be interested in this job. And there's normally a few good reasons for that. The most common is your company can pay them better than they're already being paid, but oftentimes compensation is an issue. Perhaps your company offers better opportunity for growth. Perhaps this job opportunity is a promotion from their existing role, or as they join your company, you're going to help grow them. Or perhaps you just have great coworkers. It's a really good work culture or good benefits. But you need to think about what it is that will attract an employee. And if you don't have anything to attract somebody, this is a problem, because the only people you'll be able to attract are people who don't have any other opportunities. So people that might have been fired, or people that are not likely to be good employees. So if you don't have reasons to attract somebody to your company and to this job, this is not just a HR or a hiring or a recruitment problem. It becomes a business problem. And if you find this to be the case, this is something I would encourage you to discuss with your HR manager if you're a recruiter, or perhaps the business team or the people that you work with, because that probably points to some problems in the business. And a few things not to do, and these are pretty basic. Don't underestimate how long it can take to hire somebody, because it often is a long process, especially if you're looking for the right person. But it's more importantly, it's a lot of work. So don't underestimate how much work it's going to take. And when you're working with your team, don't give them unrealistic expectations about the type of people you can bring to the business or how long it's going to take to find somebody. Okay, great. So if you've done this stage successfully, you should have a great marketing document, which is your job description, and you should have a firm understanding of the job, and you should have reasons for attracting candidates so you can bring them into the search pipeline. And this is the next stage. So using that job spec, you need to begin to think where you're going to find candidates who would be a good fit for this job. So if we use that finance example from earlier, you could either look in finance departments of companies, you could look at an accounting firm, or if it's an entry-level role and you're willing to train somebody, you could look for students who studied finance or accounting in college. So think about it, and that's broad. And as you get better at recruiting, you'll have a more specific perspective about where to find talent. And one common mistake here, and one thing you should do, is you should use your network more. So after you've determined what you're looking for and where you're going to find people, one of the things that people overlook is using their personal and professional networks, or not using them enough, even if you think you use it. You should ask high-performing employees at your current work or previous high-performing individuals that you've worked with for their recommendations, because more often than not, people who are good at their job recommend other people who will be good at whatever it is the job you're looking for, because these people have high standards for themselves, and they want to make sure that whoever they recommend meets those standards as well. And I want to be careful here, because just because somebody is recommended to you does not mean you should hire them, or does not mean that you don't need to interview them or assess them. Whenever you get a recommendation, you still should put this person through the assessment process that we're going to talk about after we're done with this section. Now, one general concept is whenever you're looking for talent, you need to search in the right places and go where the talent is, and then pay attention to where you're finding good talent. If you're looking at, for example, the accounting firms or finance departments at big companies or finance students, and you find that 80% of the candidates that you later identify to be good candidates come from accounting firms, you should spend more time attracting talent from accounting firms. You should spend more time on whatever gets you the most results. And this goes for job marketing as well. So if you post a job on 5 different websites and a LinkedIn group, a trade association, and you also spend time looking for individuals on LinkedIn, and you find that 80% of your people are coming from your outreach on LinkedIn and a trade association, but you're only spending 30% of your time on those 2 tasks, you should spend a lot more of your time on those tasks. And this can really be generalized beyond recruiting, beyond hiring, to really any sort of work. Okay, so at this point, you should be reaching out to a lot of people. You should have posted the job a lot of different places, and people should be reaching out to you. And you're going to begin planning for an initial interaction. And initial interactions, in my experience, are best when they're low stakes. People feel most comfortable and are most willing to consider an opportunity when they don't feel that there is any pressure for them to do anything with that information. So, for example, if I reach out to you on LinkedIn and my message were to say, hey, I work at this, I work at General Motors. I think you'd be a wonderful candidate. Let's do an interview. Let's talk tomorrow. This person might feel first confused. They don't know what the job is. They don't know why you're reaching out to them. And they don't have an opportunity to understand the job before sort of committing to a process. And so they're likely to either not respond or they're likely to just tell you no. Whereas, I find when I reach out to somebody for the first time, I always I ask for an initial conversation, but I position it so it's a very low pressure, low stakes environment, and it's easy for someone to say yes. I introduce myself. I tell them what I do and who I work for. I tell them about the company I'm helping. And at the end, I just say, I'd love to speak with you, have an exploratory conversation. Even if this role isn't right for you, maybe it's right for somebody in your network or somebody that you know. And this last bit is quite important, because many people are willing to dismiss an opportunity for themselves very quickly. They don't feel that they need a lot of information sometimes to just say no. But by one, recognizing that it might not be the right opportunity, but also asking them for their recommendations, all of a sudden, now they have something, they can do a favor for a friend. If I ask you to think about something for yourself or one of your friends, you're much more willing to talk to me, because even if you're not interested, you might know somebody who is. And this is also a great way to get candidates, because if you're pretty close to what you're looking for, but not quite there, this person will often know somebody who has the thing that you're looking for. So this is something that's often overlooked, but it's really important to do. I guess some tactical elements. I always try to reach out both by phone and by email. I get a much better response rate this way. If it's possible, if you have both their phone and their email. You should use both. And remember to treat people well. Recruiting and hiring someone is an intensely personal human business. And it's important to treat people well, one, because it's the right thing, but two, you are often their first impression of the company that you work for, or the company that you represent. And they will judge your company based on how you treat them. And frankly, if they don't like you, they will probably say no. So it's important to treat people well, to be honest and forthright, and it's important because they're going to remember that, and they might say no, but they might also say good things about your company if they liked you, or they might say bad things about your company if they didn't like you. So treat people well. And one thing I forgot is, when you talk to someone for the first time, even if it's a low stakes environment, you still need to sell a candidate on the role. People think of recruiting as HR, which it is, but it's really a sales role. You are selling a job to a person, and you need to explain to them why they should want to work for your company and why they should want this role in particular. And this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is really understanding what your company can offer to this person, because the more your company can offer in terms of responsibility, in terms of career growth, in terms of positive culture, in terms of compensation, the better the quality of candidates you're going to attract. And you need to articulate this, because even if all of that's true, if you don't explain these things to someone, they won't know them. So it's your job as a recruiter to really be a salesperson for your company and sell everybody on the role. I'm going to check the chat briefly to see if I'm missing something. I always requiring experience and job, is it necessary? That's a great question. We're going to talk about that later. What not to do at this stage. Don't waste your time with bad candidates. If you know immediately that they're not going to be hired for this role or any other role, don't spend time with them. This job takes a lot of time. You need to be protective of your time. On the other hand, always talk to interesting people. Always network, because your network is really your best tool, both to help your company, but also to help yourself in your career. So take the time to network with interesting people who have interesting jobs, who are accomplished, even if you don't have a role for them, because maybe in a year or 2 years, you would have a role for them. And if you've already developed a relationship, they're much more likely to listen to you when you do have a job for them. So take the time to network. Some other mistakes people make at this attraction stage is they overlook people because of geography. If you're trying to recruit somebody for City A to work in City A, but you don't have anybody, but somebody lives in City B, but they look great, you should absolutely reach out and see if they're interested. Especially if they've reached out to you. If somebody from a different city has responded to a job posting, but everything else looks good, you should absolutely consider this person, because you don't know their reasons for moving. Young people move to chase job opportunities. I see it a lot at my company, and for sort of entry-level hiring. People also move because they want to be closer. Sometimes they have family in a different city, and they look for jobs in that city so they can move closer to family. There's many reasons. Don't overlook people just because they live in a different place. And this is also a good way sometimes to, if you have a strict budget, if you're recruiting for a big city, People who live in other parts or smaller cities or suburbs, they often make less money. So if you often deal with financial constraints, it can be worth talking to people in other parts of the country because they might make less money. And so your job opportunity might be more attractive to them. One other mistake that people make is they sometimes disqualify candidates who have a broad skill set, are effective at a lot of things, but they don't have one specific thing that they're really known for. So if you recall the 3 to 5 key skills that I talked about earlier, you need people to check those boxes. But if they're sort of if they get a B in those 3 to 5 things, or some of those 3 to 5 things, but they have lots of other great qualities, that person often bears further consideration. Another mistake is don't leave deal breakers till the end. If you have a set budget, or for a hire, how much you can pay somebody, or if you need somebody to be located in a specific location, you should discuss these things on your first call with somebody. I discuss location when I reach out to somebody. I say, this role would be based in Chicago, or this role would be based in New York. And that sometimes is hit or miss, because sometimes people are willing to relocate after they learn more about a job. But if you say it at the beginning, they immediately disqualify it. So sometimes I don't share location at the beginning until I can talk to them, until I can sell the role. So I sell the role, and then I say, yeah, and it would have to be based here. So cover that at the end, because there's nothing worse than getting really excited about a candidate. They get really excited about your job. You have a first conversation, you interview them, they interview with the team, and then you talk about location and salary, and it turns out they can't move, or they make more money than you can offer them. So remember to ask about these things up front. And lastly, even as you sell a job opportunity, you have to be totally honest and never mislead anybody about what the role is. Again, it's wrong, and it's bad for business. If you tell somebody that they're going to be doing all these exciting things in your company, but you really have them, doing a more entry-level role, and you hire this person and they expect to be doing these exciting things, they're going to be upset. They're not going to work as hard as you might want them to work, and they will likely sort of complain about your company, which hurts your brand reputation. And they might leave too, because they felt that they were hired to do a different job than the one they're doing. So it's important, even as you sell a company, to be very upfront and honest about what it is this person would actually be doing. Okay, so at this stage, if you've done this all successfully, you should have several candidates who are interested and on paper and after a short conversation look like they could be a good fit for the job. So how do you narrow the field? And this is where we get to interviews. And interviews are important, but as we talk about later, they're not the only thing you need to do. So interviewing happens in 2 parts generally. It happens first with a recruiter for the company or a person in HR. And then a second interview, if they do well on the first interview, will happen where they will become introduced to the team they work with. And either the boss will interview them, or perhaps the broader team might interview the person, depending on the role. If you're an entrepreneur, like some of you from 51 Labs, obviously you're both the recruiter and you are the boss. So you're doing both of these things. And if you're an entrepreneur, you need to play both roles. You should prepare for your interviews as well. You should read their resume, and you should prepare questions and really think about what you want to learn from an interview. And it's easy to prepare. When I prepare for an interview, I read a resume and I look over those 3 to 5 key characteristics I'm looking for. And I come up with questions that will give me an understanding of how well a person scores against those 3 to 5 criteria. So if I'm looking for a finance person and I need them to be able to do a budget for my company, I will ask a question about, have you done budgets before? Okay, yes. Was that a primary part of your role? Oh, it wasn't a primary part. You only did it once and it wasn't really what you did on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so when you ask these questions, don't be afraid to dig in and ask the same question and sometimes challenge the candidate. Unfortunately, some people will overstate their accomplishments, and perhaps something that their team did all together or their boss really did, they will say that they did. And it's easy for these people, if you don't challenge them politely and nicely, to get away with it. And you're going to think, wow, they've done all these amazing things. They only have 2 years of experience, but they're really acting like somebody with 10 years of experience. That should probably tell you that they are overstating their accomplishments. So watch out for candidates who kind of oversell themselves and challenge these people. And if they're a person who's actually accomplished the things they say they've accomplished, they will welcome an opportunity to talk about it in more detail. So if you ask, but do you do budgets often? What type of budgets do you do? Is this something in your day-to-day work? And they say, yeah, absolutely. I prepare budgets once a week for 3 different departments in my company. I'm responsible for keeping them updated, for changing them as we learn new things. And I've been doing this for 2 years. They're going to be happy that they get to explain more about their work, and they're not going to feel challenged because you asked them. So don't feel bad about challenging a candidate. The next thing, so that's how you kind of conduct an individual interview. Make sure you're really asking questions around the key skills that this person needs. There's 3 to 5 key skills we've identified. Now, how do you kind of conduct all of your interviews? Because you should really seek to have all of your interviews be conducted in the same manner, because it's fair to all of your candidates. If they have the opportunity, they're asked the same questions, and you'll get better results. When you prepare questions and they're basically the same, or many of them are basically the same, it really helps you have a standard process that ensures quality. Because if you don't do this, if you don't prepare, it's easy to just sort of start talking. If you like the person, you might not challenge them. And at the end of the interview, you might not actually have a good understanding of what they've done in their past roles and why they would be good for your job. You might just remember, oh, we had a good conversation. And this is a mistake that people make, is they don't really, if they like people, they don't really interview them for the skills that they need. And it's important to like somebody. Teams work better when everybody gets along, but don't let the fact that you like somebody prevent you from learning more about them. Some general questions that I always ask is why people have made job moves in the past. So if you're interviewing somebody who's had 10 years of experience at 5 different companies, why did they go from this company to this company to this company? Were they fired? Is that why they moved companies so many times? Or do they, just use a new job to get a raise, which I understand, but what that means for you as a recruiter is they might leave your job in 2 years. So ask people about their job transitions. Sometimes it actually will identify good candidates too. I often find really high quality candidates, they have a few moves, and that's many times because somebody they worked with before wanted them to join a new company because they had a reputation as a really good worker, somebody who was very effective, somebody who was a good leader. And when they joined a new company, they wanted to keep working with that person. So this can be a question that really separates high quality candidates from low quality candidates. I always ask about motivation. Ideally, they are excited to join your company. Everybody, of course, they want the money, but is there something else that they're excited about that draws them to your company? Because if the answer is no, well, they're more likely to leave, and then you have to do a job search all over again. So try to find out what motivates people to join your company. And it's probably one of the topics that you use to sell the role anyway. And the last is sort of assessing for what we call cultural fit. But that means basically, do you think this person, excuse me, will get along with the team that they'd work with? And this is very important, but also make sure that you don't disqualify somebody just based on perhaps an idea that you have about this person. So this is something you need to be careful on, because a lot of recruiters will sometimes pass on great candidates for reasons that actually aren't very good. So you really need to think about, if you're passing on somebody, why you don't want them to join your company. Okay, so you've interviewed some candidates and you liked a few of them. How do you choose the number one candidate? How do you choose the person that you want to extend an offer to? And I think this is the most important part of the topic and the conversation today, because this is something that nobody does. I rarely meet recruiters who do the right thing here. And I'm going to use a metaphor, a story to explain what. So we have a picture of a rock band, and you might wonder why there's a picture of a rock band here. And I'm going to explain. Imagine you want a guitarist to join your rock band. You've reached out to many guitarists. You've told many guitarists why they should join your rock band. And now you've interviewed 3 or 4 guitarists. Do you just, you ask them, how long have you played guitar? Have you been in a band before? And then do you just give somebody the job based on that? No, absolutely not. You ask them to play guitar. You ask them to play guitar, and you should ask your candidates to play the guitar too. You should watch them do the job, because the best way to determine how well somebody will do their job is to watch them do the job. You should always audition your candidates. And this is probably the biggest change you can make in your recruiting process. And it will have by far the biggest impact. And this is, there's a few steps to this. One, in order to audition somebody, the best person to audition a candidate is the team that they would work with. So if you're a recruiter, you need to work with the business team regarding the position you're hiring for to get them to believe in auditioning. So you need to be able to convince them why they should do this. And it should be easy. It's basically a trial run. And if they do well at their audition, then they're likely to do a really good job. And if they don't do a good job, then you should be happy you know that before you offer to hire them. And from a research and a data perspective, there's a lot of studies on hiring and the best way to hire people. And they basically all find out that this is the best way to hire somebody. And this is something that very few companies do. They generally just rely on interviews and resumes to make a decision about who to hire. And what you really should be doing about making a decision is this audition. So the audition should be the biggest factor. If we go back to that finance example, if you need this person to make a budget, you should say, hey, look, we're really excited about the interview. We'd love to just kind of see you make a budget. So could you kind of come in for, maybe a few hours, and we're going to give you some of our finances, and we're going to ask you to prepare a budget for us, and see what they say. Again, candidates that know what they're doing and are good at what they do will love this, because it gives them a chance to really show off their skill. And you should offer to pay people for this part of your interview process, which sounds funny. It sounds funny because you're not offering to give them the job just yet. But if you're asking somebody to do 4 hours of work or come in for a full day of work, I think you should offer to pay them for their time. And that shows the candidate that you're serious about this part of the process, that you're really, you're serious about them. You're treating them respectfully. So it's a very worthwhile investment to pay them for their time to audition. Okay, so you've auditioned a few candidates successfully, maybe one or two are really good. Then it comes down to simply thinking about, who does the team like better? And this is something that the team will decide. They will probably gravitate to one candidate or another and say, look, we think Joe and Mary, they both did a great job at the audition, but we just liked working with Mary more. We liked that she said this and that, and we would prefer to work with Mary. And this isn't really the recruiter's job to make this decision. Your job as a recruiter is to provide great options to whomever is hiring this person, so their manager, really. So this is something that the manager will decide. It is your job, however, to get the manager to audition their candidates. And we're beginning to come up on time, so I'm gonna move this along to get to Q&A. But there's a few things you should keep in mind. You should still be selling your candidates. You should still be telling them why they should want to join your company. And you should also be telling them that you're still excited about them, because it's easy for people to lose interest. And often the best candidates, the people who are really good at their jobs, have many options, and you were competing against their other options. So remember to tell them why your option, your job is the best, and make them feel like you're excited about them, because people want to go where they feel that they're desired. So remember to keep selling your candidates. And once you're prepared to make an offer, this might be specific to the US, but often candidates negotiate their salary at this stage. So sometimes what we do is we will give them an offer, and with that offer be willing to pay them an extra 10 or 15%. So if they negotiate, we're able to get them to a number they're happy with, and they're willing to sign the job offer. So be prepared if you see candidates negotiating a lot. I'm not quite sure specifically what it's like in Iraq for negotiation, but this is something to keep in mind. And there's a few things you can do to mess up at this stage. And that's basically forgetting about your other candidates. You should not forget about your other candidates. If they've interviewed with you, and auditioned with you, and if they're viable, even if they're not your first choice, you should keep them interested. You should tell them what's going on, because even if they're not the person you give the offer first to, perhaps that person doesn't accept, and you need to go to your number 2, or sometimes even your number 3. So if you forget about them, you don't talk to them for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, they might think that you're not interested in them, you don't want to hire them, and they will lose interest. So even as you are pursuing your number 1 candidate, so to speak, remember to also keep everybody else feeling good about the job opportunity. And when somebody does accept an offer, you should absolutely tell everybody else that you chose somebody, and the job opportunity is now no longer open, because they've spent time with you, they've invested their time. You should show them the respect to let them know what happened. And you never know when you have a new job, and they might be right for that job. And so you want to keep these people feeling good. You want them to have a positive impression and experience with your company. So these are basically the do's and don'ts of hiring. And here are the key takeaways. So if you remember one slide, remember this: prepare for success, invest the time it takes to learn about the job and understand what's attractive about the job so you can market the opportunity. Remember to build your pipeline. You need to attract a lot of candidates, and that's a lot of work. That's more work than people realize. I think that's more work than the interviewing part of the job. And to do that, you should focus on your network, and you should focus on candidate development strategies that work best. So wherever you get the most results, you should do more of that and less of everything else. And then lastly, I think the most important part is remember to audition your candidates. This is where you're going to see the greatest quality difference in people you might have hired in the past versus people you hire through an auditioning process. And that's really the how to hire somebody from a high level. That's the process that we use. This is the process that I use to recruit people. And I think it's applicable across the board. From here, let's go into a question and answer environment. So if you have any questions about the presentation, please feel free to write them in the chat. And we also have some of the questions from the survey that we can turn to as well. So I'm gonna read the chat now. By audition, do you mean testing the candidates? A written test is okay. I would say a written test is good, but an actual exercise where they do something is better. So if we use the budgeting example, give them, finances from 2017 and ask them to create a budget for 2017. If they're a salesperson, ask them, have them meet with your sales team and ask them to give a sales pitch to one of your sales team members. Or ask them to come up with a plan of who they would go talk to sell your product. So, it's a written test can be great. You can ask them to write down who they'd go after, but you generally get best results when it's a live interaction. Okay. Do you recommend probation period for every job? So not every job is the type of job where you can have a probation period. If you're hiring somebody who has an existing job, they will probably not accept a role that has a probation period, because by nature, if it's a probation, there's a chance that they lose, they don't get an offer at the end. So if they have a stable job, maybe they like your opportunity more, but if they join your company, there's a chance that they then lose this job that they just left their old job for. They probably will say no to that. So I would not recommend a probation period for every job. I would recommend an audition for every job, because you get a lot out of the audition, just like a probation period. Okay. From Mohammed, HR manager, I want to ask, if you have a position that is very difficult to find a good qualified candidate, what should you do? Yeah, so it depends why you're having difficulty. If you're having difficulty because everyone who is qualified is making much more money than you can offer them, there's not a lot you can do. At that point, you can try to find people who used to do that job and are now out of a job, so they're willing to accept less money. If it is a question of a very specific skill set where there's just not many people that have this skill set, you need to be very thoughtful about where you would find a person that has this skill set. And this generally comes down to knowing what companies have similar business models to your company and trying to go after those companies. So if you're looking for somebody who has experience with a lot of different things that normally don't come together, okay, so the skill is so difficult to find in this country. Hiring foreigners is difficult. Okay. Yeah. So there's a few things then. I would say you need to consider how much you can train on the job. Is it possible to find somebody who can, with some training, learn how to do this job? And if so, maybe consider that. If it's going to take you a year to find this person, but you can train them to do this job in 3 months, maybe hire somebody and train them. Hiring foreigners is difficult, yes. If you need to hire a foreigner, if you have the money, you can hire a recruiting firm, but you need to be careful. There are a lot of bad recruiting firms out there. I'm somebody who works for a recruiting firm. You can hire somebody to help you make that hire, people who specialize in finding, expatriates or foreigners. And you just need to spend a lot of time doing this. So I think that it comes down to, if you can't find anybody locally, you generally can find people. Sometimes you need to get creative. So go back to the 3 to 5 things and think, okay, if you take a bigger view of it, if you generalize these things a little bit, what skills are very applicable here that you didn't immediately think of, and then look for people with those relevant skills that are not exactly what you were looking for at the beginning. And you need to spend a lot of time reaching out individually. So if your company relies a lot on posting on job boards, that can be a great way to find lots of employees at the entry level. But if you're looking for a specific skill set, you often, as the recruiter, need to be looking for specific people. So I'd recommend you spend more time looking for people or training people. Is having an office considered an essential element for hiring and attracting talent? This is a regional question, so it's hard for me to answer. A lot of U.S. tech companies are now saying you don't need an office, but I think people want the option to have an office. But if you're a startup, I think it's totally fine to say, look, we're working in my house. It's a new company. I'm spending my money on hiring good people so I can pay my people more. I don't want to spend my money on real estate. So just be prepared to explain why you might not have a location. I want to speak a question. Is that, yeah, please speak the question. Absolutely.
Hi, this is Rabin.
Hi, Rabin. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm the founder of Hadiari, a startup. I want to ask a question regarding startups. Like, people usually hesitate to work for startups. Being an entrepreneur, we need to hire some people in the first level. And what do you recommend for that? As you said, like, you should attract people, potential candidates for the position.
Yeah, hiring for startups is unique. There's specific challenges to it, but there are also specific opportunities. I would say when you're hiring for a startup, you should rely on your network, your social network, and your professional and your educational network. If your company doesn't have a brand that people would recognize, or they don't know about your company, but the people you know trust you, you are sort of the thing that is attracting people to your company. Because when you're an entrepreneur, the company is just you. So I would recommend you focus on sort of leveraging your connections and your network, because that's where people will trust you. You'll have that element of trust, and you need that element of trust because going to a startup is risky. The business hasn't been around for a long time. It could fail. And then if it does, they're out of a job. So people need to trust you. I would say you should also rely on 5-1 in some cases, or a startup incubator. And that gives your business or your startup it gives you more legitimacy. And it builds comfort that this is a real business and not just something some random guy started. If you can provide visibility into your business, if you have generated revenue already, so they have confidence that you'll be able to pay them, I think these are These are all, really important things to do. So a lot of it's about building trust and credibility that your startup is going to not only continue to exist, but it's going to grow. And you also will probably need to offer equity in your business. They're taking on if you're trying to hire someone, they're taking on a lot of risk in joining you. And, to compensate them for the risk, you probably don't have a lot of money, but what you can give them is equity. So they can sort of share in the success of the business. And this helps you too, because if you give somebody equity in your company, they become invested in the success of your company. And because you only have 1 or 2 or 5 employees, everybody is so critical to that company's success. So you want everyone to feel like they need to work as hard as they can, because they benefit from that hard work. It's not just the boss who gets all the benefit. So you're going to need to give people equity as well. Does that answer your question, Rabin, or is there anything else that you still want to understand better? It's a broad topic, and you and I can also talk kind of one-on-one or personally as well.
It helped a lot. Thank you.
Great. I'm glad. I'm going to read up through the chat. I think we're actually over time, but I can spend a few more minutes here if people want to stay on and their question hasn't been answered. So I'm going to read through. What is more professional, resume or cover letter or just CV? I think resume and CV, to me, they mean the same thing. People who call their job history a resume versus somebody who calls their job history a CV, I often don't see a difference. I think in academia, CV means something different and special from a resume, but I don't think they mean anything. I think if you're asking how to write a good resume, your resume is a sales document. So it should really list the accomplishments that you're most proud of. It should list your responsibilities in each of your jobs. And it also helps if your company is not a company that everybody knows, to write what your company does. So if you work for a company that, offers oil field services, I do a lot of work in energy and that sort of thing, but it's a small company and people haven't heard of it. You should write that I work for XYZ company. It does oil field services. Here's my responsibility. Here's what I've done. This is why I'm a great performer at my job. Maybe I'm more productive than my other employees. You should do something that lets recruiters know that you're a great employee. Cover letters, I think, are helpful for entry-level jobs. I rarely see them for executive jobs, but I would encourage you to write a cover letter, because it often forces you to learn about the job you're interviewing for. I think, and now we're getting into questions about how do you look for a job. I would say it's more important in many cases to network and reach out to people at the company you're applying to a job for than writing a cover letter, because you're going to learn more that way. And those personal connections at a company will probably help you more than a cover letter. So if you're willing to write a cover letter, I'd say first network really well. And if you've already networked really well, then it can also be helpful to do a cover letter. This is very helpful, blah, blah, blah. Will I share slides? Yes, I'd be happy to share my slides. I think Sava will handle the recorded version. I would like you to explain more on giving equity to the team. Yeah, so equity standards are this is very specific. And this is probably something that I would need to know more about your very specific situation to answer this question for you. So lots of things can change this. How risky is it? How important is this person? How much money were they making before? You know, if somebody was very senior at their last company and you really need this very senior person, you're obviously going to have to give them more equity. But you obviously want to keep equity for yourself. So this is a very fine balance, and I would need to know more about your specific startup, your specific business model, how many employees you have. So you will give generally the most amount of equity to the first person you hire, and you will give less and less equity to every person you hire after that, if they're the same person. Because as you hire more people, your company is, it's a safer place to work. So when I said that equity is compensation for risk, it is very risky to be the first employee at some company. But if you're a startup and you have 10 employees and now you're profitable, you're making money, to be the 11th employee, it's much less risky. So you don't need to give as much equity to the 11th employee as you would give to the first employee. If hiring is sales, what about price? Should we sell the job position in the so are you asking if you should hire the person who costs the least? I would say hire the best value person. And sometimes that can be the cheapest, you know, the person who has the lowest salary, and sometimes it can be the person who has the highest salary. So knowing how much to pay somebody, I ask for their expectations. In the United States, we're not allowed to ask somebody how much money they make. We can only ask how much money they would need to make to leave their job. And then most people tell me how much money they make, but I can't ask. I would ask how much they expect to make. If it's a sales job, people who are more comfortable with sort of sales bonuses tend to be better salespeople. For example, if I'm a salesperson who's really bad at my job and half of the money I make is from how many sales I'm successful at, I would not do well. So I would not want a sales job that has a lot of sort of bonus variability. But if I am a great salesperson and I know that I can sell anything and I'm great at selling, I would gravitate to roles that will reward me based on my total sales. So again, audition your candidate, figure out who seems to be the best salesperson, and figure out how much money every person kind of would need, and then make a comparison on value, not just on price. And by the way, if I am not answering your question, please write it in the chat and I'll come back to the question. How do you do an assessment of complex tasks that take a long time to perform? Great question. If you're a recruiter, then you really need to convince the business team to do the assessment or the audition. We're calling it the audition. And if you're the business team who's doing the audition, you know, it's kind of like grading a test in many cases. If they're doing the budget, it might take them, you know, several hours to do the budget, but only 20 minutes to review it. And you just need to spend that time. If it's a sales pitch, well, you need to listen to the sales pitch. The time it takes is the time it takes, and it is worth that time, because this is the most valuable piece of information you're going to get, and you get it even if it takes a full day. This is very helpful, and somebody's going to be hiring people is a big investment. It costs a lot of money to find the person, and it costs a lot of money to pay the person. So you should be willing to spend the time on the job assessment. And you need to spend however long it takes to do that properly.
Chris, maybe we can take one last question, as we are running a little bit over the time. If you guys feel free to unmute yourself if you have any specific question that you haven't written in the chat box.
Now, nobody wants to speak first, but please speak up. You know, these have been great questions. I'm looking forward to the last one, and we can continue this some other time, or we can converse via email, or perhaps another session. So if there's any last questions, please unmute yourself, and I'd love to answer it.
And if you feel more comfortable sending an email, please feel free. You can send it to us, or we can share Chris's email tomorrow along with the recorded version and the survey and also the slides. If there is no more question, I think we can wrap up, Chris. If you have any last things to say, please feel free.
Well, just a thank you to everyone. Oh, I think we got one more. Thank you to everybody for coming today. Thank you for your questions. It was great to see an audience so engaged, and thank you to Savo and 51 Labs for having me. I'm looking forward to maybe doing another one of these, or answering your questions via email. And I'm glad that this was helpful to everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for coming.
Very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for such an informative session. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's been a pleasure being with all of you today. Thank you for your participation and questions. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.